be curious kind of dating. And it has been, in a word, fabulous. And it has been, in another word, chaos. Hey guys, it's Agnes. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you're new here. I'm a psychiatric nurse and therapist. And today I'm going to be talking about dating as a poly woman in her 30s. So I cannot speak to anybody else's experience, and I would hate the thought that somebody could watch this and think, oh, this is how all poly women feel, or this is how all poly people feel, because I'm really not in a position to be talking about that at all. So this video is essentially going to be about me. You're welcome. So dating in my 20s, that's where I'm going to start this story. Dating in my 20s was so grim. It was so grim, and I felt a huge amount of pressure that was mounting as I got older and older, this pressure to find the perfect person, to have the perfect relationship with. And this pressure was really, it solely came about because I would quite like to have a child at some point in my life. I've certainly taken a lot of the pressure off myself now, but in my 20s, I could really only hear my body clock ticking. That was the only thing I could hear. Tick, 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 tick.
Oh. What is that I hear? A ticket!
I can't even get started on the idea of a body clock, because I think so much of that idea is wrapped up in the patriarchy and misogynism and grim. So that was my dating experience in my 20s. Any person that I came across, I would have this mad checklist in my head. And guys, this is a checklist in my head as a mental health professional. I still had this checklist in my head. So I think that this is something that is very commonly occurring, although I did say I can't speak for everyone. I do think that this comes up a lot in people's minds, that you start creating this absolutely unreasonable checklist. Like, I couldn't go on a date and just have a nice first date with someone and just have a nice time and be like, oh, they seem like a nice person. No. What I was asking myself is, could I imagine them spending time with my extended family? Did they have a job that would be good for our children? For our future children. This is not a first date, guys. This is not a first date. And I don't even mean like, were they paid well in their job? I mean more like, did their job take them away from home? What would our family life look like? What would our lifestyle look like? Is this person, are they ambitious? Are they driven? Are they creative? Are they explorative? Are they curious? So there was a huge amount for this person to live up to. And quite frankly, on a first date, it is very unreasonable to go in with those types of expectations. I mean, I was drawing a picture for myself over the next 20 years and trying to see if this person fits. And I mean, I don't know, maybe there are people in the world that that kind of approach works well for. I found it so stressful, and for me, it really sucked the fun out of it, to the point where at the age of 29, I had assumed I would never find that thing that I was looking for. So at the age 29, I was so bitter and jaded, I'd completely given up on it. And then I met my now husband. And so a couple of things happened at the same time. I was able to answer my husband baby question. I was able to answer that question for myself, which was very reassuring, but at the same time, we opened up our relationship. So I'm not going to talk about him because he hasn't agreed to put his entire personal life on the internet, whereas I have. So I'm really not going to talk too much about him at all. It's not my business. So one of the things that happened when we together first started exploring the idea of being non-monogamous, and in my head, I just thought that could create the maddest situation for me, and mad in all the best ways, where I could actually date people that I had previously thought of as completely inappropriate for me, totally wrong for me. I could actually go and do like the fun dating thing that I really should have been doing in my 20s. I don't like the use of the word should have. I would like to retract that. I should or shouldn't have been doing anything in my 20s that I either was or wasn't doing in my 20s. I realized that being non-monogamous it would just give me so much freedom to explore in a fun and playful way like I hadn't been able to do before because of the pressure I'd put on myself. So talking from a poly perspective, that now that I have, essentially secured a large part of my future, not that anything's guaranteed, but I have secured a large part of my future. I am now married.
Oh my God!
And I'm not planning on having a baby anytime soon, but it's certainly in my plan for like the next 10 years. So now that I have answered that question for myself, it created a level of security that was really going to be able to give me so much freedom. And so that is a very privileged place to be, even as a poly person, because that's not every poly person's experience. There are polyamorous people out there who don't have those questions answered for themselves yet. So this is certainly where I'm not talking about everybody. This is really just my experience. There's a huge amount of privilege in being able to, I think, kind of secure your future like that. And I wouldn't want it to seem like, well, now that I have my husband and my future children plans, now that I have that secured, I can go on to just date anyone in any regard and they're not important. Because just because I've answered those security questions for myself, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't or couldn't then go on to have these really meaningful, committed, serious relationships. I speak about this more in my video about the different types of ethical non-monogamy. So it's not that because I have a husband and the person I'm going to have a baby with, that now I can do this really kind of frivolous, means nothing dating where I would be like using people. I would never be okay with that just in myself. That would seem really unethical. So I've certainly not dated like that. But what it did allow me to do is to literally just remove all of the pressure. I have been able to have the most incredible love affairs with people that previously I would have turned them down because of something so unimportant and sometimes really materialistic and sometimes really superficial. And I have been able to be so much more open to the world and myself and all of these connections that I previously would have ignored or looked past. So I was able to essentially change entirely my expectations for dating and entirely my expectations of what a partner could be, because it wasn't that they were ever going to have to meet my mum, for example. It's not to say that they couldn't ever meet my mum, because I don't have rules like that in place for myself, but they weren't having to meet those crazy high expectations that I'd set for myself in my 20s. Now, this has come along with its own set of problems. I think at points I have thought I can date anyone, and then I've kind of dated anyone, and I've really reduced my expectations too low, and I've found myself entertaining connections where I've then been able to sort of take a step back and I've been like, girl, what are you doing? What are you doing? That's kind of fun. It's sort of fun to, my poly coach called it fuck around and find out. Obviously not in a way where you're using anyone. I really don't want this video to come across as oh, you can do anything and you can date anyone. There is a responsible way of doing all of these things, and I've absolutely endeavored to be as responsible and ethical as possible during this process. So I think some of the misconception about sort of non-monogamous dating is that it is about pleasure seeking. Ooh. And that it is not serious and really just kind of about fun. And although there can be a huge amount of fun and a huge amount of pleasure to be found in non-monogamous dating and poly dating, I would say that that has overall not been my experience. Actually, overall my experience has been about learning really significant things about myself during this process. It has bolstered my sense of identity as an individual, and it has made me stronger in all of my relationships. Whenever I have started to form a new connection with somebody, the thing that has struck me most is how I have been able to connect with myself. So by viewing yourself through the lens of a new person, by introducing a new person to, this is my life, this is my family, this is my routine, this is my work, these are the things I feel passionate about, I think that you are able to connect with yourself on a much deeper level. You're almost kind of reminded of who you are in yourself completely as your own identity. You are reminded of that. And I think that you are able to connect with yourself in a very, very strong way. So people who don't know anything about non-monogamy might view pleasure seeking and just going out and having sex with loads of people is really, really frivolous. But I would argue that even within that, ultimately what you're doing most of all is connecting with yourself. And I'm sorry, but what is more profound in this world than getting to know yourself better? Like learning things about yourself. I think it is the most meaningful human endeavor you can possibly go on. So whether we're talking about non-monogamy from like a love perspective or from like a pleasure perspective, what is more important than connecting with yourself? As a mental health professional, I would argue nothing. Our experience of the world starts and ends with ourself. The way that we look at the world and with the way that we look at everything is through our own individual lens. And if you can make yourself happier, healthier, more open-minded, what could possibly be negative about that? And now I'm not using this as an argument for like everyone should be non-monogamous, because I really don't think that it is for everyone. It is a vastly complicated path to go down. And I do think like with huge risks, like great rewards, but that's just the way that I look at it. And I don't expect everyone to agree with me that non-monogamy is a good idea. But from a dating perspective, I think that it has had a lot of kind of knock-on benefits, like a lot of side effects that I didn't think it would have, that have ended up being some of the most meaningful experiences of my entire life, quite frankly. One small way that I would like to mention my darling husband, shout out. I'm always shouting that man out. I think one of the things that surprised us when we opened up our relationship is just how different we both started dating. And my dating, this is where I'm not going to talk about him in more detail, but I can talk about myself. My dating was so much more chaotic than I thought that it would be. And I think that this is the way that I found to really kind of honestly indulge myself, and indulge myself in all the best ways. Indulge myself in the chaotic dating that I missed out on in my 20s, the haphazardness that I probably should have been exploring again in my 20s, and I didn't because I was locked down with this seriousness and sense of pressure. I was doing very sensible dating most of the time in my 20s. Boring. And now I get to do this more caution to the wind. Let's just have fun with it and see what happens. Let's explore, let's be creative, let's be curious kind of dating. And it has been, in a word, fabulous. And it has been, in another word, chaos. And I think what both me and my now husband weren't really expecting to happen is that I am essentially known for having these quite brief but really intense connections. They burn bright and then they burn themselves out quite quickly. And it's not something that I'm not trying to do things like that. I think I just find something that fits, and it fits me for a relatively short period of time, and that it is over. And I'm actually perfectly happy with that. I think just because some relationships are short-lived, that doesn't make them any less significant. It doesn't make it like they weren't worth doing because they didn't last for a very long period of time. I think longevity in relationships is really, really overrated. I think it's not the be-all and end-all. I've had some wonderful connections that have been brief. So that has been my experience of dating in my 30s. Some of it has been surprising, some of it has been messy, some of it has been gorgeous. And I have been exposed to so many cheaters. I spoke about this briefly in my video about non-monogamy in general, the types and structures of non-monogamy, and I will do a whole video on it at some point, because the cheaters, guys, the cheaters do be cheating. And they do be using non-monogamy to cover up for their deception. It's gross. I'll talk about it sometime. That is it for this video, guys. I think this is going to end up being way longer than I meant it to be, but I really hope that it was of value. I hope that it was, yeah, maybe entertaining, maybe eye-opening. I don't know. Let me know what you thought of it down below. Let me know if you were surprised by any of this, or if this is kind of what you expected for it to look like when you're married and dating. I will see you in my next video. Take good care. Bye. I think that longevity in relationships is really like over-exaggerated as a very important thing. Is really, what the hell is the word I'm looking for? Oh my God.